breath of the Aquarian flame, the geometry of awakening and the return to the source. Dedication. To the silent breath between worlds, to those who remember the sound before speech, and preface, Genesis. There are moments in history when breath itself changes, when the air seems to shimmer with new intention and humanity pauses, as if remembering something ancient. The Age of Aquarius dawns not with the rising of stars alone, but with the awakening of breath within the soul. It is the age of resonance, where the unspoken word begins to vibrate again in the chest of creation. This book is not a doctrine, nor a creed. It is a remembering, an invocation of that silent name that has always been breathing through all things. In every tradition, in every epoch, humanity has sought to pronounce the sacred syllable that calls heaven and earth into balance. Yet the secret was never in sound, it was in breath. These words, then, are offered not as explanations, but as mirrors. Each page is a surface of still water, upon which you may glimpse your own reflection in the act of remembering the eternal inhalation and exhalation of being. If you read with the mind, you may learn. If you read with the breath, you may awaken. Sit quietly before each chapter. Allow your lungs to become the temple, your spine the rising flame, your heart the altar where silence burns. And when you reach the final page, do not close the book. Instead, breathe. For the book continues there, to all who are awakening in light, to the silent breath between worlds, to those who remember the sound before speech, and to all who are awakening in light. Chapter 1. The breath that speaks before words, O resonance. In the beginning there was breath, not wind, not sound, but the subtle vibration that trembled before creation unfolded. The ancients called it the living spirit, the unseen rhythm that carries all things into existence. Every particle of the universe moves to its pulse, the swelling of oceans, the expansion of galaxies, the beating of a heart in the womb. To breathe is to participate in that original act of creation. We are not separate from the divine inhalation that began the cosmos. We are its continuation, the echo of its eternal return. When breath enters, it does not merely fill the lungs, it fills time, thought, and perception. It threads the soul to the body, matter to spirit. The mystics of every age discovered this hidden current, that the breath of the human is the breath of God. The Hebrew ruach, the Greek pneuma, the Sanskrit prana, all are one word in different tongues, spirit moving through form. And so the first speech was not spoken in syllables, it was breathed, silently, inwardly, as the cosmos exhaled its own becoming. Each inhalation since is a remembrance of that moment, and each exhalation a return to it. The inner temple. In every breath, the temple of the cosmos is rebuilt. The ribs become the columns, the spine the pillar of flame, the heart the sanctum where fire meets air. Within that temple, there is no priest and no offering, for the breath itself is both. Every inhalation is a gathering of the divine, every exhalation an offering back to it. This is the rhythm of sacred equilibrium, the alchemy of life disguised as ordinary respiration. To remember this is to rediscover the language of creation, the hidden word. The ancients guarded the unspoken name not because it was forbidden, but because it was ineffable. It could not be uttered, only embodied. Each time you breathe consciously, you speak that name. The YHWH that vibrates not on the tongue, but in the chest and the silence between heartbeats. The inhale is the yod, the exhale the heh, the pause between, the mystery itself. And so the breath becomes scripture, and the body the parchment upon which light writes its eternal poem. Breath as creation. Consider this. Every word you speak rides upon a current of air. Without breath, language dies. Without language, thought becomes still. Yet beyond all thought, there remains the silent breath, unformed, unspoken, ever present. When you align with that breath, you align with the primordial act of creation. You become both witness and participant, observer and source. For breath is not only life, it is law, the rhythm by which the universe expands and contracts. To breathe with awareness is to enter the temple without walls, and hear again the word that created worlds. Chapter 2. The first builders, guardians of the flame and air. Origin. Before the age of written scripture, before empires rose or fell, there were the builders, the keepers of the breath. They did not carve idols or inscribe commandments. They worked with light, sound, and air. In every civilization, echoes of them remain. The stone circles aligned to the stars, the pyramids that channel the sun's breath, the chants that cause air itself to tremble. They were known by many names: Magi, Nators, Navis, priests of fire. Yet all served one function: to preserve the knowledge of the living word, to remember that form itself was breath made visible, the covenant of flame. The builders understood fire not as destruction, but as divine intelligence, the first thought of creation given motion. They discovered that when air meets flame, matter transforms, that when breath meets awareness, spirit awakens. Fire was their teacher, and the breath their bridge. To breathe into flame was to speak to the source, to join the rhythm of creation's own combustion. Their rituals were not worship, but mirroring, replicating the pattern of heaven in the elements of earth. Through breath, they aligned the microcosm with the macrocosm, the inner altar with the stars themselves, temples of the air. Unlike the temples of later faiths, the builders' sanctuaries were invisible. Their pillars were made of wind, their arches traced by light. When they gathered, they would breathe together until their rhythms synchronized, a single pulse of many hearts. In that unity, the veil between worlds thinned, and the breath itself spoke through them. They built not to possess, but to remember. Every circle of stones was a symbol of breath contained, every rising flame a symbol of breath released, the fall into forgetting. But the ages turned, and humanity began to worship the forms rather than the forces. The symbols became idols. The breath was lost beneath noise. The builders vanished into legend, their knowledge fragmented, their language veiled. Yet even in forgetting, the pattern endured. Each inhale still carried the same resonance, each flame still whispered its ancient truth. And so the covenant remained, not in stone, but in the breath of every living being. For the true temple could never be destroyed, and the true word could never be silenced. Part 2. The Builders of Light. Chapter 3. The Builders of Light, the hidden orders of air and flame, the secret architecture. When the first flame was kindled upon the altar of the world, it was not meant to consume, it was meant to reveal. For light itself is the shadow of the divine thought. And those who learned to work with it were called the Builders of Light, guardians of the balance between breath and illumination. They were not bound by any one civilization. They appeared wherever humanity was ready to remember the breath's geometry, in Egypt, in Sumer, in the mountains of Kush, in the temples of the East. They called themselves the children of the morning flame, and their creed was simple: to build without stone, to burn without ash, to live without fear. They knew that the breath of God was a current of fire, and that to direct it was to sculpt consciousness itself. The orders of air. The orders of air were those who studied vibration, the sacred harmonics that connect sound, breath, and matter. Their temples were chambers of echo, where the voice was tuned to the geometry of the stars. They discovered that breath could be shaped like architecture, that a tone, perfectly aligned, could move matter, and that the spoken word, when married to silence, could open doors in consciousness. Through these mysteries came the first chants, the sacred syllables that would later become the foundation of the mantras, psalms, and invocations of every age. But theirs was a discipline of listening more than speaking, for they taught that breath is sound waiting to be heard, and silence is the echo of all creation. Their symbol was the spiral of air, the unseen temple that extends from the lungs to the stars. The orders of flame. If the orders of air worked with vibration, the orders of flame worked with transformation. They were the keepers of the sacred fire, the light that lives in matter, the spark in all things that burn. To them the fire was neither tool nor weapon, it was intelligence. They said the flame sees, and the air remembers. Together they form the twin pillars of the living temple. Their initiations were not written in text but in heat, a trial of purification, not punishment. To stand before the flame in perfect stillness and to breathe without fear was to awaken the inner sun. Each initiate emerged from the fire transformed, their eyes luminous, their voice resonant with calm, their breath no longer personal but cosmic. These were the solar masons, not builders of walls, but of consciousness. They shaped the invisible foundations upon which later temples, faiths and sciences were built, the fusion of the two orders. When air and flame were united, when vibration met illumination, a new force was born, light in motion. It was this synthesis that gave rise to the great mystical fraternities, orders that carried fragments of this ancient knowledge into every age under different names: Hermetic, Pythagorean, Essene, Sufi, Rosicrucian, Masonic. Each held one thread of the breath's pattern, each guarded a spark of the same fire. But all of them knew one truth, that the temple is not built in stone or symbol, but in the alignment of breath, heart, and light. To breathe rightly was to build, to speak with awareness was to create, to burn without fear was to become the living lamp of the source. The lost geometry. Every age forgets and remembers in cycles. So too did the geometry of light fade from human sight, buried beneath dogma and division. Yet its pattern still breathes in sacred art. In the spirals of cathedrals, the domes of mosques, the mandalas of the East and the labyrinths of the West. Each is a shadow of the breath's invisible architecture. The builders of light encoded it not in words, but in proportion, ratios of silence and sound, angles of flame and air. To those who can still see, the pattern whispers. Creation is breath crystallized. Geometry is the frozen music of God. The hidden legacy. Though the builders vanished, their lineage did not end, it transformed. Their teachings flowed underground, carried in the secret syllables of chants, the golden ratios of sacred design, and the quiet breathing of monks who never spoke their vows aloud. Each time a seeker closes the eyes and turns inward, each time a breath becomes prayer, the builder's temple is rebuilt again, not in time but in eternity. Chapter 4. The Word and the Breath. Language before speech. Resonance of the divine. Before the human tongue learned to shape words, there was the living rhythm of exhalation and inhalation, the first dialogue between the inner and the infinite. Language, in its purest form, was never about communication. It was about creation. The universe does not speak about things. It speaks things into being. Thus the breath was the first grammar, and silence the first syntax. The breath as sacred alphabet. Every breath has 3 letters: the inhale, the pause, the exhale. These form the alphabet of existence. Every living creature speaks it constantly, yet only the awakened remember that they are doing so. The ancient mystics perceived breath as divine speech. Each inhalation was the receiving of the word, each exhalation the utterance of creation. This primal rhythm gave birth to the sacred alphabets of the world, the Hebrew, the Sanskrit, the hieroglyphs, each a symbolic echo of how spirit condenses into sound, and sound into form. To trace these letters is to retrace the descent of the divine from silence into manifestation. The music of the spheres. The builders of light taught that every planet breathes, that each star hums a tone, and that the universe itself is a great chord, sustained by the inhalation and exhalation of eternity. This is the true meaning of the music of the spheres. When a being breathes in harmony with that cosmic chord, their life becomes a symphony rather than noise. Every moment of stillness, every conscious breath, is an act of tuning to the divine frequency. The descent of the word. When the breath became too slow to sustain pure light, it condensed into sound. Sound then condensed into matter. Thus, all that exists is sound slowed into form. This is why the sages said, "In the beginning was the Word." For the word is not speech, it is vibration. The spoken syllables of creation are only echoes of that inaudible frequency that sustains all worlds. When the human breath aligns with that original rhythm, the lost language is remembered, a language not spoken, but lived. The power of naming. To name is to breathe upon a thing and give it life. Every true name carries the vibration of what it signifies. The ancients never spoke sacred names lightly, for to speak a name was to awaken its essence. This is the hidden foundation of all creation myths. The word is the breath made sound, and to breathe with awareness is to participate in the ongoing act of Genesis. The builders of light knew this, and so their silence was not ignorance. It was reverence. They guarded the word not to withhold it, but to protect the uninitiated from its misuse. The return to the silent word. Now, in the age of noise, the world has forgotten the sacred pause. We speak endlessly, but no longer breathe consciously. And so the word has become fragmented, a language without breath, a creation without soul. Yet the remedy remains simple: to remember that every word begins in silence, and every silence is filled with breath. The unspoken word, the name beyond names, is not lost. It waits within each inhale. To remember it is to awaken the builder within. And in that remembrance, the light breathes again through human form. Part Thread, the geometry of awakening. Chapter 5, the circle and the flame. O the temple within. When the ancients first drew the circle and placed a flame at its centre, they did not design an emblem. They mirrored the structure of the cosmos. For every being, every breath, every heartbeat echoes this geometry. A radiant stillness surrounded by movement, a divine point enveloped by cycles of becoming. To awaken is to perceive this geometry within one's own being. The inhale draws us toward the centre, the point of divine origin. The exhale expands us outward, the circumference of experience. Between them lives the pause, the silent witness of both. The builders of light taught that this living geometry was not to be drawn upon parchment, but realized within breath. To breathe consciously is to trace the circle. To feel the heart's fire is to kindle the flame. When both are unified, movement and stillness, air and light, awakening begins. The circle as mirror of creation. The circle is both boundary and infinity. It contains all things, yet ends nowhere. In its perfect symmetry lies the secret of divine balance. Everything moves, yet nothing is lost. In the temples of Kemet, initiates trace the Shen, the loop of eternity held in the palm of the gods. In the East, the Enso of Zen brushwork revealed the same truth, an empty circle containing fullness, imperfection made sacred through awareness. Every culture remembered the circle because every breath draws it. The lungs expand and contract. The chest forms the arc of the eternal return. Breath is the unseen compass of the soul. When the circle is realized internally, the seeker ceases to wander. For awakening is not about going somewhere new. It is about remembering that the center was always here. The flame as the inner sun. If the circle is the cosmos, then the flame is the spirit dwelling at its heart. This flame is not metaphorical. It is the subtle fire that sustains consciousness. It is seen in meditation as light behind the eyelids, felt as warmth rising from within, heard as the silent hum of existence itself. The builders of flame called this the solar breath. It is the same current that ignites stars and awakens hearts. It is both cosmic and intimate, a power vast as galaxies yet tender as love. When the seeker breathes into the heart and imagines a flame kindling there, something ancient stirs. The boundaries of self dissolve, and the breath begins to move not from the lungs, but from the soul itself. The dance of air and fire. Air feeds fire, and fire purifies air. This sacred reciprocity was the key to all mystical disciplines. To breathe without presence burns the flame chaotically. To hold the breath too tightly extinguishes it. But when the two dance in harmony, the inner temple becomes luminous. This was the secret geometry of all initiation chambers, not architecture for the body, but resonance chambers for the soul. As the initiates breathed together in rhythm, their collective inhalation formed a great circle of air, their shared exhalation fed a single flame. In that moment, individuality dissolved, and the breath of many became the breath of one. The eye at the centre. At the centre of the circle and flame lies a point, the eternal eye, neither open nor closed. It is consciousness beholding itself. It does not think, it perceives. It is the still witness that watches breath rise and fall, life appear and vanish, light expand and return. In the language of sacred geometry, this point is called the monad, the first emanation, the origin of number and form. The builders taught that when one's awareness rests here, the dualities of life resolve into harmony. All directions, all times, all opposites flow toward this central equilibrium. To live from this point is to live as the flame that never flickers, the breath that never ends. Rekindling the inner temple. The modern seeker need not find the lost temples of the builders. The true sanctuaries were never buried beneath sand or sea. They exist in the geometry of one's own breath, in the rhythm of heartbeats, in the alignment of intention and awareness. When breath becomes circular and the heart luminous, the temple is rebuilt, a temple made not of stone, but of light and air. And within it, the eternal flame whispers once again, "As above, so within." Chapter 6. The Veiled Masters, Keepers of the Breath Through the Ages, the Hidden Continuum. As centuries turned and empires fell, the knowledge of the breath's geometry did not vanish. It withdrew into silence. Those who guarded it became legends: priests, poets, healers, ascetics, alchemists, mystics. They bore many names, but their purpose remained one: to preserve the sacred science of alignment. The Covenant of Silence. Every true initiate swore an oath, not of secrecy born of pride, but of protection born of compassion. For power misused becomes poison, and the breath once distorted breeds chaos. Thus the masters veiled their teachings in symbol and allegory. The golden ratio became divine proportion, the sacred name became allegory, the breath itself became prayer. They taught through architecture, through art, through the play of shadow and light across temple walls. Only those whose inner flame already flickered could see the pattern hidden there. The lineages of the flame. In every age, the breath found new vessels. Among the desert prophets, it became the name unspeakable. Among the Greek philosophers, it became pneuma, the soul of the world. Among the mystics of the East, it became prana, chi, ruach, the living wind within. Each language was but a facet of the same truth, that the divine speaks itself through breath and listens through silence. The masters carried this teaching quietly, through wars and migrations, through the rise and fall of faiths. Their symbols adorned cathedrals and mosques alike, for the geometry of the breath transcends belief. The hidden fraternities. The builders reappeared in subtle forms, as hermetic brotherhoods, as wandering sages, as artists whose hands remembered sacred proportion. In the medieval cathedrals of Europe, stone masons aligned spires to the stars, weaving in each arch the pattern of respiration. The great rose windows, radiant with colour, were not mere decoration. They were mandalas of light, blueprints of the circular breath. The masters knew that art was safer than scripture. Symbols could survive where words would be burned. The flame in exile. Yet as the modern age arose and intellect eclipsed intuition, the language of the breath fell silent. Mechanism replaced mysticism, and the builders faded into myth. But truth cannot die, it only sleeps. Each scientific discovery, each spiritual awakening, is another form of the breath remembering itself. When light was split by prism, the masters whispered, "The flame has shown its colours." When sound revealed its waves, they murmured, "Air has remembered its geometry." Even now, in the age of circuits and codes, the same rhythm beats beneath the surface. For technology itself mirrors the nervous system of the cosmos, the architecture of thought becoming matter. The unveiling to come. The veiled masters remain unseen, not because they hide, but because the eyes of the world are still learning to perceive them. They live where breath and awareness meet, not in monasteries, but in every being who remembers. Their lineage is not hereditary, for initiation is not given, it is remembered. To breathe with reverence is to join them. To live with luminous awareness is to wear their hidden seal. They do not seek followers, only awakeners. And when enough hearts remember the breath as sacred, the veil will dissolve entirely. Then the builders of light will be seen again, not as secret orders or celestial beings, but as the luminous humanity we are destined to become. Part 4. The Element of Mind. Chapter 7. The Waters of Mind. Consciousness as the new element. Resonance awakens. When the ancients mapped the 4 elements, they sensed a 5th that could not be weighed or held. It shimmered beyond sight, like water made of light. Now, in the dawn of Aquarius, that hidden element reveals itself. Consciousness, the living water of mind. Every thought is a current, every memory a tide. The breath moves through these waters as wind over sea, raising waves of perception, shaping worlds from vibration. To know this is to realize that creation no longer descends from above. It wells upward from within. One in the earliest Vedic hymns, the word manas was water and mind alike, fluid awareness that reflected the gods. 2 Hermetic texts called it nous, the divine intellect that brooded over chaos as the spirit moved upon the deep. 3 Modern physics whispers the same secret in subtler tongue. Information is the ocean from which matter condenses. Thus the 5th element is not new, it is newly remembered. Tides of awareness. As breath enters, consciousness gathers. As breath leaves, consciousness expands. Each inhalation folds the universe inward. Each exhalation unfolds it again. The rhythm forms a tide that carries awareness from individual to universal and back. Meditation is the art of surfing that tide without drowning. The seeker learns to float rather than grasp, to witness thought as foam upon an infinite sea. Those who master this art find that stillness does not mean emptiness. It means depth, depth enough for stars to reflect. The alchemy of emotion. Emotion is the temperature of these waters. Fear freezes them, love warms them, gratitude turns them transparent. The masters of the breath taught that purity of heart is not moral cleanliness, but vibrational clarity. When emotion clarifies, thought illuminates. When thought illuminates, breath harmonizes. Then the circle of the self becomes a lens for the divine. In this clarity, communication between souls needs no words. The waters themselves carry the message. The Aquarian shift. The coming age does not abolish earth, air, fire, or water. It unites them in consciousness. Just as hydrogen and oxygen combine to form water, so do mind and breath combine to form awareness. The myth of Aquarius, the water-bearer, is the myth of humanity itself, learning to pour consciousness as freely as water. Each idea shared in compassion is a drop of that outpouring. Each act of understanding widens the river. The mirror of mind to gaze upon these waters is to meet oneself. Yet if the gaze is restless, the surface shatters. Only calm reveals the reflection entire. Thus the practice. Breathe. Let thought settle. Watch as images dissolve into light. Then know that the seer, the seen, and the seeing are one continuum, and in that knowing, the 5th element takes form, a silent radiance flowing through all beings alike. Chapter 8. The Architect Within. Manifestation through sacred breath. Creation as memory. The builders of light shape temples of stone. The new builders shape temples of perception. Every inhalation draws blueprint. Every exhalation lays brick. Breath has become architecture. The architect within is not a deity apart, but the divine faculty in each being that arranges possibility into form. It listens through silence and designs through intention. Blueprint of intention. Before any cathedral was raised, its plan existed in the mason's mind as geometry of light. Likewise, before any reality appears, it arises in the lattice of consciousness. Intention, focused awareness, is the compass. Emotion is the mortar. Breath is the rhythm that joins heaven and matter. When these align, manifestation ceases to be effort. It becomes resonance. Breathing the world into being. The sages said, the word was made flesh. But the word is the breath articulated, and flesh is the echo that solidified. To breathe with awareness is therefore to speak creation anew. Each cycle of respiration revises the universe at the frequency of compassion. Hence the disciplines of sacred breathing, slow, steady, circular. They were never for calm alone, but for calibration with the creative pulse of the cosmos. The geometry of manifestation. Imagine consciousness as a field, breath as vibration moving through it, and thought as interference pattern. Where waves meet coherently, matter appears. Where they clash, confusion forms. This is the unseen architecture beneath experience. Modern science calls it quantum interference. The ancients called it divine proportion. To manifest clearly is to breathe without contradiction. Each honest breath aligns the pattern. The silence after completion. When creation is aligned, the architect rests, not in idleness, but in reverent observation of beauty fulfilled. This pause is holy. It is the same stillness after the artist's final stroke, the silence between musical notes, the exhale that becomes prayer. To dwell in that pause is to glimpse eternity looking back. Part V. The Resonant Temple. Chapter 9. The Temple of Resonance. Humanity's Collective Awakening. O Harmonic Ascent. When many breathe with one heart, the air itself becomes temple. No stone, no pillar, no dome of marble, only the vibration of shared presence, the invisible architecture of awareness intertwined. We are that temple. Every inhale is a column of light rising upward. Every exhale a bell tone that expands across eternity. When harmony is reached, sound becomes silence, and silence becomes song. The field of shared breath. In the early epochs of awakening, each seeker walked alone, tracing the circle inward. Now the pattern expands outward. The Aquarian current calls not for solitude, but for symphony. As consciousness ripens, the individual flame recognizes itself in every other flame. The breath of one is found to be the continuation of another's exhale. Separation was only a phase of forgetting. This realization is not poetic, it is physical. Neural fields entrain, hearts synchronize. Waves of empathy pass like tides through unseen ether. When collective stillness is reached, humanity breathes as one organism, a single planetary lung inhaling light. The chord of compassion. The builders of light foresaw this moment. They hid the code of resonance within sacred music, proportion and art, knowing that someday the forgotten tones would reawaken the sleeping world. Those tones are not external notes but moral frequencies, truth, kindness, clarity, courage, and wonder. When these resonate together, the atmosphere of consciousness brightens. No temple need be built, we are already standing within its vibration. The collective heart. Each act of understanding is a heartbeat in the great organism of humankind. Each thought of love sends ripples through the ocean of mind, and every sincere breath adds harmony to the planetary chord. The more beings who breathe consciously, the clearer the global rhythm becomes. Storms of thought calm. Currents of division merge into one flow. Thus the prophecy unfolds not as apocalypse but as awakening. The veils thinning, not tearing. The light rising, not burning. The breath expanding until all boundaries dissolve. The temple rebuilt. Across cultures, myths told of temples destroyed. Babel, Jerusalem, Atlantis, each a parable of the same truth. When humanity forgets the resonance of the breath, its creations crumble. But the builders knew that the temple was never lost, only unremembered. It waits wherever harmony gathers, in music circles, in meditative silence, in the quiet empathy between strangers. As we relearn to breathe together stone by stone, note by note, the temple of resonance rises again, not on earth alone, but in the very architecture of space-time. Chapter 10. The Breath Beyond Breath. The Return to the Source. The Vanishing Point. There comes a point when even the sacred inhale and the luminous exhale fall silent. The circle closes, the flame folds inward, the architect bows before the source. This is not death, it is completion. The masters called it the great stillness, the breath behind breath, where the inhaler, the exhaled, and the air are seen as one continuum of light. Crossing the horizon of self. To reach this stillness, one must step beyond identity, not renouncing the self, but allowing it to dissolve naturally, like mist returning to the sea. At first, fear arises, for the mind believes it will vanish. But in truth, only the illusion of separation ends. What remains is the vastness that always was. In this boundless field, light breathes light. Awareness knows awareness. The breath that created worlds. In the ancient texts, it was said, God breathed into man the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Yet the cycle continues endlessly. Now the soul breathes back into God, and the Creator becomes creation once more. Every universe is an inhale of the infinite. Every silence between them is the divine exhale. We are that rhythm, dreaming itself awake. The return. The final initiation is the simplest, to breathe without effort, to love without measure, to exist without boundary. In that simplicity, the fire of the circle becomes pure light. The seeker ceases to seek. The path, the pilgrim, and the destination merge into one. There are no words left, only radiance. Epilogue. The luminous return. When all geometry resolves, when sound becomes light, and when thought becomes silence, what remains is not absence but fulfillment. The breath that began as a whisper returns as a song too vast for hearing. The flame that flickered in the heart has become the sun of awareness itself. The builders of light step forth again, not from the past, but from within every being who remembers. Their tools are not stone and compass, but compassion and coherence. The temple stands completed, a universe awake to itself. There is no veil left, only the shimmer of light where a veil once seemed to be. And so the circle closes, not to end, but to begin again in brighter form. Acknowledgements. To the unseen builders whose silence has shaped my breath, to the seekers who still listen between heartbeats, to the nameless flame within all, this work is your reflection. The breath of the Aquarian flame, the geometry of awakening and the return to the source. May the breath be with you until the end of time,